Hello everyone, my name is YY An and I'm currently at MIT as a visiting professor and faculty at Indiana University. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this wonderful opportunity. Today, I would like to talk about novelty and success in the wild world of fanfictions. And you may be wondering, yes, that's Captain Kirk, who is pregnant with Spock. And yes, that's the Harry Potter with lightsaber. And before going into the talk, I'd like to thank my amazing collaborators, Alice Jing and Simon Dedeo. And Alice is the one who did all the heavy lifting for this project. Okay, what makes a creative work succeed? This is the starting point of our project. As you may know, there can be numerous reasons. But most discussions revolves around the innate quality and social influence. You know, maybe some songs or movies are just better than others. Or maybe it's all about the social influence. It's less about the quality itself. But this framing misses an important point, which is that no creative work exists in a vacuum. They exist in the context of millions of other works that precede it. Therefore, to get a full picture, I think we should consider the existing context and asking the question of what's the context behind this particular work. Okay, imagine yourself after a hard day's work. You've just opened Netflix or whatever, and you want to choose a movie to watch. So what do you choose? If you are like me, you may end up watching something completely predictable and unsophisticated. And you may watch like really stupid movie that you have watched before and finding comfort in not risking your time to exploring something new. And maybe because of that tendency of people, sometimes almost exactly the same story is told and retold again and again. Here's a nice montage of every depiction of the origin story of the Batman. Or you may be thinking about the Spider-Man. Right after one series ended, they started a new one, like maintaining the core storyline. So you can also see the tendency by just looking at what people watch. For instance, in 2018 and 19, pretty much every single highest grossing movies was either an adaptation, a sequel, remake, or part of a bigger cinematic universe like Marvel. Like almost every single movie. And actually, Kurt Vonnegut once put this in a beautiful short lecture.
Sickness and poverty down here, wealth and boisterous good health up there. Here's the very middle. Now, this is the BE axis. B stands for beginning. E stands for electricity. Now, this is an exercise in relativity, really, is the shape of the curves of what matters and not their origins. So we'll start a little above average, is why get a depressing person? We'll start, the whole thing, we call this story Man in Hole, but it needn't be about a man, and it needn't be about somebody getting into a hole. But it's just a good way to remember it. Somebody gets into trouble, gets out of it again. People love that story. They never get sick of it.
And you may be also familiar with the idea of the hero's journey, which has become the basis for so many stories, most famously Star Wars. And this is literally a formula to create an epic story. And when a story follows this framework nicely, we tend to enjoy them over and over and over again. So I think these examples tell us that we really like familiarity. We like to watch what we like again and again. At the same time, we do see innovations and revolutions. And we do enjoy them, right? We are thrilled to see something innovative and something that pleasantly destroys our expectation. So there are two opposing forces. We like something old and familiar. At the same time, we enjoy new and innovative. Would there be any regularities that govern what we like, given its novelty? And actually, this question has been an important fundamental question across several fields. One natural idea can be called balance theory, which is super simple. Maybe we like a good mixture of both. If a story is too familiar, maybe it's too boring. If a story is breaking every expectation, maybe it's too chaotic to enjoy. So a reasonable way to address that may be meeting at the middle. And here is the famous curve, sometimes called Wundt curve, or sometimes Wundt-Berlin curve, that capture that idea. So on the y-axis, we have hedonic value, like how much we enjoy. And on the x-axis, we put novelty or complexity. And as you can see, it was conceptualized that we enjoy novelty, but only up to a certain point. And after that, if it's too novel, then we don't enjoy it anymore. So this is such a natural way to resolve that conflict. And it has been studied in many contexts. Here are some examples. And I would like to highlight this particular work by Samit Srinivasan. So he looked at all the movies in IMDb and looked at the keyword associated with the movies as a signal for their novelty. And by measuring their novelty and revenue of those movies, he could see a very similar curve here. As the novelty increases, the revenue tend to increase, and then it comes back again. So this curve seems to hold in many cases. But although this is really cool, there are still many caveats. In particular, there are so many factors that are beyond our control if you look at this type of data. So for instance, we cannot control things like genres and many content features, as well as the social influence factors. So it has been known that social influence can greatly change the outcome. And that means the outcome may be quite sensitive to things like marketing efforts. And if that's the case, the theory of optimality can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because if you're aware of the Wundt curve or the theory, you may allocate your advertising budget for those that are likely to succeed according to the theory. Or you may strive to create something that fits the theory, not risking your chance. And that's where the fanfictions comes in. I think the fanfictions provide us with a nice opportunity to study this hypothesis. First of all, fanfictions, they are super creative, transformative, lots of mixing, remixing, almost without limitations. So there is a huge variance in terms of novelty of the fanfictions. And also, they are usually organized around specific fandoms. Like for instance, most of the fanfiction in the Harry Potter fandom, it's all about Harry Potter series, the canon of the fandom. In other words, in a specific fandom, all the fanfiction inherit all the history, characters, and many other settings. And that means within a fandom, we have a fairly good control over the topics and the content of the fanfictions. And that means we can better isolate what we want to see. And moreover, they are largely free of financial incentives, advertisement, or promotions. And most of them are freely available, so easy to analyze. And finally, there are lots of them. People write a lot of fanfictions. So that's why we think fanfictions are really good subject to study the science of success, especially with respect to the novelty. So where did we get the fanfictions? We used a website called Archive of Our Own, or AO3. This website is organized based on the fandoms and hosts a lot of fanfiction writers and readers. From this website, we collected about 400,000 pieces of fanfiction across 23 fandoms, and we have about 100,000 authors. And we do a lot of data cleaning, like removing fandoms that do not have any canons, and consolidated some fandoms together, and filtered only the English fanfictions, and set the minimum length of fanfiction to be 500 words. And after that, here's the number of fanfiction across fandoms and across time in our dataset. And this service allows users to not only post fanfictions, but also give kudos to the fanfictions. So one can give kudos, which is like button, or one can bookmark or comment, and so on. And here we consider kudos to be the primary metric of the success in each fandom. And we consider other metrics like comments as an indicator for engagement. Okay, so we have lots of fanfiction. We also have their metadata, including the author, timestamp, kudos, comments, and so on. But we need to measure the novelty of a given fanfiction to study how novelty and success is associated. So how should we do that? First of all, a reasonable assumption we can make is that the novelty of a fanfiction is defined given the context of past fanfictions during a certain period of time. And we also assume that that's the only thing that determines the novelty of a given fanfiction. And we used two strategies. The first one is focusing on the terms, and the second is focusing on the topic. The term-based novelty is operationalized by using the TF-IDF vectors. So we calculate TF-IDF vector for each fanfiction using the same fandom's past 6 months worth of data. And that lets us represent each fanfiction as a TF-IDF vector of the terms. And once we have those TF-IDF vectors of the past fanfictions, then we can average the past to obtain the centroid of the past fanfictions. And this allows us to measure the distance between the fanfiction of our interest and the centroid of the past fanfictions. And by measuring the cosine distance between these two vectors, we define the novelty of this given fanfiction. So we can do similar computation using topic modeling. So here we use LDA with 100 topics. And once we have the average topic distribution, we calculate the distance using the Jensen-Shannon divergence. So after we defined these novelty measures, we were wondering whether these measures make sense or not. So we did stratified sampling and some close reading. And we found that when a piece of fanfiction has low or moderate novelty, they seem normal, while you can find some really interesting fanfiction in high novelty region. So here are some examples. So there was a fanfiction called I Am Groot. And actually the entire fanfiction is I Am Groot. Here's another one, The Real Meaning of Idioms, posted on Sherlock Holmes fandom. And this is almost entirely written in the form of SMS messages, inspired by the famous TV series. Another type of fanfiction that have high novelty tend to be crossovers. So for instance, Harry Potter with lightsaber, or some crossover between Marvel universe and Doctor Who universe. So we were fairly happy about this close reading and move on to ask the question about the association between novelty and success. So as the first step, we simply looked at the correlation. So here is the result between top novelty and the average success in terms of kudos, hits, comments, and bookmarks. And as you can see, this is not what we expected. So we expected something like this, inverted U-shaped curve. But what we saw is almost monotonically decreasing curve. So that means the success is associated with low novelty. And as you have higher novelty, your chance of success decrease. And another pattern we can see is that the variance of success, especially in terms of kudos, seems to increase a little bit as you have higher novelty. And that may suggest that most of the novel fanfiction flop, but some may have huge success. So how about topping novelty? Yeah, actually we see very similar pattern. As topping novelty increases, the metric of success goes down. We can also look at the two-dimensional space of term novelty and topping novelty in terms of what's the average kudos or comments. And as you can see, as the top novelty and topping novelty increases, the chance of success seems to go down. But interestingly, there seem to be huge successes when you have novelty in only one aspect of it. For instance, there seems to be more success when you have high term novelty, but low topping novelty, or vice versa. Okay, that's unexpected. But of course, you may ask, but there are so many other factors, right? And simple correlation cannot tell us the whole story, right? Yes, that's a very important point. And that's why we did regression analysis by controlling many variables. So in the model, we care about the novelty measures while controlling the following variables like fandom, which fandom, number of chapters, age of the fanfiction, number of works by the author, archive warnings, which indicate violence or death of main character, etc. etc. And we also used a two-part model that combined logistic regression and OLS in 2 steps because there are a lot of zeros in our data. And we first looked at the correlation metrics between variables. And as you can see, all the outcome variables seem to be strongly correlated, while they have weak negative correlation with novelty measures. And as independent variables, we used term novelty, topping novelty, and in some models, we also included the squared term novelty and squared topping novelty, because the Wundt curve hypothesizes nonlinear relationship between novelty and success. And here are the results. So the first column is kudos, second column is hits, etc. etc. And what you can see here is that in most models, the coefficient for novelty is negative. So as something becomes more novel, kudos, hits, comments, bookmarks, they seem to decrease. Except this one case with comments. And the square terms tell us another interesting story, that their coefficients are positive. So in the Wundt curve, because it's inverted U-shape, we expect those squared variables have negative coefficient. But here, what we see is positive coefficient. And that suggests an interesting scenario, which is rather than the inverted U-shape, what we are seeing may be the U-shape. And that's the exact opposite of this classical theory, right? So to further probe this phenomenon, we employed the Generalized Additive models, or GAM. And GAMs are really nice models because it provides very flexible and interpretable model. So the key idea here is that we have dependent variable, which is multivariate, but maybe you can model that variable using the sum of univariate smooth functions of independent variables. And in doing so, we basically break the model into univariate smooth pieces. and that makes it flexible and interpretable. And here are the results. And as you can see, it largely agrees with our previous result. That as the novelty goes up, the kudos hits comments, they seem to go down. But you can also see that there seems to be kind of uptick at the end. So in like extremely high novelty, there seems to be more chance of success, suggesting the U-shaped curve rather than inverted U-shaped curve. And those with such high novelty, they tend to be remixes, like crossovers, and those with lots of stylistic innovations, like I Am Groot or the one with the SMS messages, things like that. So what do these results tell us? First of all, it seems like readers may not actively seek novelty, but at the same time, they seem to appreciate the novelty when presented. And some of the most successful fanfictions are highly novel and innovative, often employing like really creative stylistic innovations or remixing. And these results suggest that cultural evolution may be closer to the punctuated equilibrium. So rather than slowly evolving through the introduction of moderate amount of novelty, it may undergo very slow change for a while, and then abrupt revolutions introduced by these highly novel and innovative revolutions. And of course, we have lots of caveats. This is very special population with a special modality, and our novelty measures ignore content and structure of writing, and there may be other more reasonable operationalization of novelty. But still, I think our result may open up a new discourse about the relationship between novelty and our liking, as well as the nature of cultural evolution. Okay, thank you very much for your attention, and thanks again to my collaborators. And you can find the preprint of this paper on the archive. Thank you so much.